I was studying computer science and political economy at Berkeley. And so when I got there as a freshman, I was just looking at a bunch of different things of what seemed interesting. And I found this Bitcoin club that they had there. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. You can combine computer science with political economy to do cool stuff. And so I joined this like Bitcoin club. Um, didn't really fully understand what was going on, but I felt smarter just by being in the room and just like I was like eventually I'll absorb the stuff that everyone else is saying and I'll get it at some point. Um, and so for me, the best what we did was we started teaching. I guess technically I was a university professor at some point because so there's this cool program at UC Berkeley that students can teach a course as long as you have the like backing of an actual professor. Then you can have students teach courses. These are called decals. And so me and two friends, we taught this blockchain decal. It was Don Song was like the professor that backed us and stuff. But yeah, so we did that and then started this, that's how I kind of learned about crypto first place is teaching this course. We started this club called Blockchain at Berkeley, grew that. And then 2017, that summer I was interning at Consensus. I was like, because for 2 years we were like all like very Bitcoin maxi, and so I finally was convinced by someone that like, hey, I should take a look at this Ethereum thing. And so I remember I would listen to a lot of Epicenter podcasts and stuff that summer, and I was just like reading all the proof of stake white papers I could find, and out of all of them, Tendermint just seemed the simplest and the most like practical and like easy to take to production. And we're like, oh wow, we could just do this in like 6 months. Turns out it took us a while, longer than 6 months to launch it. But so I kind of like quit my internship at Consensus. Something about like just working on like Ethereum stuff, just I don't know, it never excited me for some reason. And so with Cosmos, I reached out to the Tendermint team. Brian was there at the time, and started working with them. Dropped out after at the end of the summer, dropped out from the university at the end of the summer and started working at Tendermint full time. Worked there for 3 years. Helped launch Cosmos Hub, Cosmos SDK, and then when Gore 2020 happened, the great organizational restructuring of early 2020, where the Tendermint company kind of imploded, but then we all found new roots, a home in the Cosmos, and so I spent some time thinking about what I want to be building, and then at some point, after a couple of misdirections, we eventually landed on Osmosis. So I don't think it should have too much impact on cross-chain MEV. They seem to be pretty orthogonal things, with the assumption that like that the MEV solutions are happening off-chain. Okay, so the reason is because mesh security. One thing I think that came off a little bit incorrectly in my Cosmoverse version of the talk was it talked a lot about like validator set overlap stuff, but that's actually not how mesh security works. It doesn't look at actual validator set overlap at all. I was kind of like in the talk, I was like talking to like, okay, this is one thing you could do, but this is bad because it will lead to like validator centralization. You'll only have a few entities like Chorus who can maybe manage to run on 50 chains, and then they'll get it compounds their thing. How mesh security actually works is using something we called it cross staking, but it's basically the same thing as restaking in EigenLayer. And given that terminology has sort of gotten more traction, I think we'll just start calling it. The reason we didn't call it restaking the first time was because we already have like redelegation in Cosmos SDK, and so we didn't want it to be confusing. But yeah, so mesh security all happens via a restaking protocol similar to EigenLayer, but it exists on every Cosmos chain, and so it doesn't affect validator set overlap at all. And so it shouldn't really have too much impact directly on MEV stuff, cross-domain MEV, other than it might make communities more incentive aligned to allow for cross-domain MEV. Because one of my takes is that cross-domain MEV is only possible if the chains are the ones that opt into it and agree to it. Because for Osmosis, what we're doing is building these top of the block auctions where in the protocol, in the state machine, it's auctioning off the top of the block. And so the nice thing about this is that it's not up to validators to choose what's the top of the block execution. It's up to the state machine. And so you having validators on multiple chain, like, a skip style, a flashbot style validators on multiple chains, it doesn't help because that doesn't help you win the on-chain top of the block auctions. And so the only way to make the on-chain top of the block auctions atomic is if the two state machines, the two chains governance systems agree to an atomicity system like interchain scheduler or something like that. So I can talk a little bit about how we're planning on doing concentrated liquidity incentives. So we are we have a couple of ideas, but the one that we're going to start with is sort of a simple one where it's very similar to the one that Dan Robinson wrote for Uniswap it's on the Paradigm blog. And so what it's basically saying is that for within a tick, if whatever the swap is, we're basically going to say like, hey, we're emitting this much Osmo per block for each of for this pool, right? And what we could do is say like, okay, well, within a tick, okay, if you made up 5% of the liquidity, you get 5% of the reward. So that thing. The one thing that we add relative to Uniswap is this idea of uptime incentives. So what we're trying to avoid is, so what it will do is it only gives you the incentives if your liquidity has been on the liquidity book for a minimum amount of time. And so we have like, I think 4 supported. We can do 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, or 1 week. So you basically, personally, I think the 1 minute kind of stuff is actually where it's most useful, but because that helps you prevent the thing where someone moves the price somewhere else to a high liquidity region and wash trades on it, because they can't just do it in a single block. They'd have to like keep the price like at this high liquidity region, and the idea is someone else would come and arb it back. And it also prevents the just-in-time liquidity. There's some people think that the just-in-time liquidity is like good because it's adding more liquidity, but it's actually it's removing liquidity that would have otherwise been sitting on the deck, and it's like making less information available on the market, which is like net bad. You want people to put their liquidity on chain rather than use this like just-in-time liquidity. So I did take a look at the proposal, and I think I left some just like small technical comment feedbacks. I think my main thing is they don't seem to like. I'd have to pull up my notes, like what I wrote for it, but I feel like they didn't figure out how to like deal with like DOS issues here. Yeah, okay, I have to find my notes. Talk on Builder API. Yeah, I have my notes. Isn't there a DOS attack where a builder can always top bid but never reveal? Yeah, so I don't know, their whole way they designed the whole like bid reveal sort of system didn't seem to make sense to me. But zooming out but that's like a fixable thing. You have to fix that. Zooming out though, like I'm happy for that to exist. I just don't think it should be part of the core Cosmos SDK module, like code base. That's what they were pushing for. It's fine for them to keep it as a separate code base and then encourage chains to like adopt it. But like I said, for Osmosis, we, instead of going for this off-chain builder API stuff, we're working with Skip to build the on-chain top of the block auctions instead. So I think by putting one MEV solution like baked into the SDK is a little bit not right, and chains should have the ability to choose which solutions they want to use. I mean, like I said, Skip has many products, right? So with like ProtoRev is one very Osmosis specific product. Top of the block auctions is mostly being built for us because we're like the ones who are like asking for it, but it is something that can be used in many chains can adopt it. And I assume that once it exists, most chains are going to want to adopt that instead. And then you have the MEV Tendermint, which is like the off-chain, like sort of the builder API style solution that the Skip team is running. And so yeah, I mean, they've gotten quite a bit of traction on the I think like Evmos and Juno and stuff have like adopted the MEV Tendermint stuff. But yeah, like I think that once they have the top of the block auctions, that's going to be a far more like interesting thing for many of the projects to use. I think it'll be popular because there's a lot of revenues to be captured from it, right? Like, especially on Osmosis, especially like, okay, if you rewind like 9 months ago when volumes were at their peaks, right? There was like significant daily volume happening on Osmosis, and that a lot of the fees, like, yes, there's some value to be captured from trading fees, but a lot of it's also just from like being the people will pay to be the ones to arb Osmosis against centralized exchanges. When the price of ATOM moves, when the price of ETH moves, people want to it'll turn into an auction system, and there's ways of capturing that value to Osmos stakers. So I imagine something like DYDX will probably also want to do something similar. Anywhere where there's like this like cross domain arbitrage opportunity, they probably will want to use like some tooling similar to Skips. To be honest, I think Mahir is probably the best when it comes to like taking like very technical topics and like breaking them down in a simple way to understand. I think all of the Epicenter hosts have like a different sort of skill set. Frederica's very good at grilling on like grilling on stuff, but yeah, I think Mahir's like ability to break down technical stuff is what was one of the things that made like I think it's such a popular like onboarding podcast for many people. Yeah, so the story of Osmosis, like the founding process was I was like really good friends with like the Flashbots team and stuff, and so we were all like so this is like summer of 2020. We were spending a lot of time, fall of 2020, and we were spending a lot of time researching uh MEV and got really interested in that. And then like Tina and Phil and stuff, they wanted to start building this auction system. And I was like, wait, I thought we're going to be trying to like eliminate the MEV from like mitigate it, not auction it off. I think auctions are good, but you want to first mitigate the harmful types. And so I went to Dave and was like, hey, how do we design something to prevent yeah, let's well, first of all, the first step was like, we were like just doing open core dev work from Sika, a validator company. We were just doing Cosmos SDK core development stuff. But we were like, hey, let's start working on a project. And so we started doing a lot of research on like threshold decryption, spent like a lot of the fall designing that. And we were like, we weren't sure what we were going to build with it yet. And we realized, well, this is like a feature, not a product. Okay, what's the product going to be? And one thing we were thinking about early on was like, I guess there wasn't a terminology for it back then, so it was hard to explain to people. But today, it's what we would have called like a shared sequencer, and it was going to be like, hey, here's this like shared sequencer chain that like uses threshold decryption and acts as this like data availability style protocol. So that was like what we were thinking of doing, and then but then at some point we just realized, like I don't know, we wanted to work at like our worry is like it's commoditized very quickly. Like I don't know, there doesn't seem to be much value in a shared sequencer when every rollup will just actually go ahead and take the code and just run it themselves. So yeah, so we didn't really find that actually to be a very compelling product. So then we were like, okay, what do we start doing? Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Josh and Tony from Kepler, Tony at a hackathon built the first version of Osmosis for one of the hack atoms. And so it was like a month-long hackathon, and he basically re-implements Balancer on Cosmos SDK. And so we were put in touch with them with Josh, and I was put in touch with Josh via Jim Yang, and we were and Jim was like, hey, they built this thing on a hackathon. Do you want to help them like launch it and take it to market and stuff? And so Dave and I started working on Osmosis, but under the presumption that just like, oh, they would be the first customer of our threshold decryption like sequencer product whenever we build it. And so then we started helping them launch Osmosis, so we have a first customer. And then at some point after like a month or two of working, we were just like, okay, let's just like go all in on this Osmosis thing, make that be like a selling feature of the DEX product itself, is this MEV resistance stuff. So yeah, that's the story of how Osmosis started. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, regulatory stuff is not really my forte. We do have a new chief legal officer who just joined the Osmosis team last week, so hopefully there's someone more qualified now making some of these analyses. But my I don't know. My general take is that there's like a strong overreaction right now from like a lot of the federal authorities just because they want to not look bad after the whole FTX thing. And you see this after you saw this even after like 2008, right, with like Dodd-Frank and stuff, where you have these like overly punitive, like reactionary measures that get put, but then slowly get eroded away, right, once they realize that they are a little bit too too restrictive, right? And so I think right now the feds are sort of just going through this like reactionary phase, and it'll actually calm down. And I think what we'll probably do is they'll probably start to go after like some of the centralized exchange stuff first, like they're kind of going after Binance right now a little bit through BUSD and stuff. And so far they haven't really been coming after like DeFi yet. I am legally not allowed to run for president. I was not born in the United States. Just Congress. One day, it'll take, not for a while. It'll be many years in the future. After Osmosis is the biggest exchange in the entire world, not just crypto exchange. Then I'll consider it. Yeah, so I mean, I do think Avalanche is really cool in general. Like even just the consensus protocol, I've always been like a really big fan of it because it's very fascinating. It's like not. I don't think it's actually a very good thing to actually use in production. It seems kind of unnecessary. You don't have good finality. You don't have like good light clients. There's a lot of stuff you miss in Avalanche consensus, but I think it is very academically interesting, right? It's like very fun. It's a very different family of consensus protocol than like Nakamoto consensus or classical BFT consensus. So I find it like academically interesting. I do find it one reason I find it very academically interesting is like I think I've always been really interested in this idea of can you do a web of trust based consensus protocol rather than a proof of stake based one, and I think that there's a way of doing it with Avalanche consensus. So that's like interesting. But on the subnet side, yeah, I think the subnets they seem very similar to like how Cosmos Hub V2 like ICS V2 is supposed to work, where you don't get a sovereign staking token and stuff when you use Avalanche subnets. You kind of have to it only allows you to use AVAX as the staking token for the chain, and you have to stake a minimum number of AVAX in order to like be able to run this subnet. And so it's a cool mechanism, but it's still more in line with this like long class of things we've seen like ICS or Polkadot style stuff. And so I think I think that some people might go use that, but I think that like the benefits of having a sovereign chain and not having to pay rent, or if you are going to pay rent, use something like mesh security, because then you are paying to multiple people and you can't get like you don't have these like lock-in things where one chain can suddenly like start charging like crazy for a security. The Avalanche, like the messaging protocol seems pretty cool. Like it's for talking between subnets. It's interesting. It's more like it's not like people have compared it a lot to IBC, but it's actually not similar to IBC. I think it's actually more similar to the XCTP or whatever Polkadot's one is called, because how it does because once again the problem is Avalanche doesn't have like a system of light clients. It's like there's no light clients for Avalanche consensus right now, and so you can't actually have subnets talk to each other and do proofs to each other. But what it does is it relies on the fact that all Avalanche validators, subnet validators, also have to be validators of the Avalanche like beacon chain or whatever it's called, P chain maybe, and so you post all cross-chain messages to the beacon chain, and then they get like sent to like another subnet, and it works because all the validators are observing the same map P chain. So that's much more similar to how XCTP works. I'm not sure how scalable it will be, but it's like really only helpful for intra subnet communication, and it doesn't help you talk outside of subnet. That's where like the whole IBC for Avalanche stuff kind of comes in. I don't know. That was a bunch of different things. I don't know if I answered the question or not. I have not played out with the Hyper-SDK yet. Luigi sent it to me, but I haven't played around with it yet. So it depends on what a hub means, right? I think there's many things that like I feel like what this whole term of like hub in Cosmos, like it's a very overloaded thing. There's many things that we could be talking about, right? There's like things you could be saying, oh, this is used for routing, right? Like routing IBC packets. I think that was the original intent, but that just hasn't empirically taken off yet. Like you see that actually every chain does direct IBC connections to each other, and then we're making the UX better with that. Where like we're launching like these like packet forwarding middleware, so you can send token. Let's say you have Atom on Juno, you want to send it to Osmosis. You need to like first send it to the Cosmos Hub and then send it to Osmosis. We make that all happen in like a single IBC packet, so it hits the Cosmos Hub and automatically generates the right packet forwarding, the new IBC packet to send to Osmosis. So the need for routing hubs, I think, is actually a lot lower than people sort of think. The other like term for what a hub could mean is like more on this like whole security style thing, and so I think that like even with mesh security, you'll definitely have some chains that are more popular for getting security from, right? Like I think even in a mesh security world, I think Atom and the Cosmos Hub is going to be a place where a lot of people are going to want to get security from because it has this like super high market cap. The nice thing about mesh security versus ICS is at least that it gives you the options to do something else. But like even then, I do think the Atom will likely be a popular default. Obviously, our goal is to make it so Osmosis is also a popular default as a popular choice as well, especially for a lot of the DeFi applications that have like high dependencies on Osmosis, that getting them to like tap into Osmosis's security network is definitely a goal. And I guess that's kind of like leading towards this thing of like I think a hub is rarely a binary thing. It's usually a, you know, I use things have hubbiness to them, right? Like, and how hubby everything in the world has power. Like any like free market system has power laws to it, and like things that are on the like like the one side of the power laws, those have higher hubbiness. And so if it's from security provisioning, okay, which chains are used like 90% of the time, maybe those are hubs, right? Or user activity, right? If 80% of the user activity is happening on one chain, does that make it the user hub or the liquidity hub if 80% of liquidity is on that one chain? So I don't know, it's not a binary thing. It's just this, it's really just more of this like meme that like, we're trying to fit stuff into. Like, for example, like we look at like things of what are the most common things people do with their rewards, and there's actually a big worry that like, oh, actually a lot of them are getting like sold, but it actually turns out no, a lot of them are actually just getting re-LP'd and rather than sold, and so that like that can inform us of like what kind of stuff we want to do. Another thing that we've learned is that apparently like a lot of the user activity on the transactions on Osmosis are from like staking rather than actually interacting with the DEX. And so that has led us to like plan on building a staking dashboard into the Osmosis website. One of our goals of one of the things we want to do with the Osmosis website going forward is like have a less emphasis on liquidity providing alone, just because it is something that I think becomes more professionalized once you have concentrated liquidity. But building almost this like sort of earn page on the site that shows you these are the assets you have, these are opportunities you can have to earn with them, whether it's staking or lending it or LPing it, or giving you these options of what you can do with the assets to earn with them. And so yeah, building this as like and then also like a sort of a the goal is to build this like mesh security centric like staking dashboard on the Osmosis site, because our goal is how do we keep people on the Osmosis site as long as possible, and then eventually they do some trades. Probably computer science. I mean, I don't know. I think I like building things. I don't know. I definitely hated doing proofs and stuff. I don't know. I never found that fun. I prefer more to like just hack on stuff and build stuff. To be honest, my favorite class in college and high school and everything was always history. And so I don't know. I'm definitely not the kind of person that like. Admittedly, I'm not the kind of person that like nerds out over like a lot of computer science stuff. Like I don't get like super excited about like I don't know, programming languages and stuff like that. To me, it's like mostly a means to like, more interested in the history and political economy. And then like computer science is a mechanism of like creating, is the tool to like impact that kind of stuff. So I think there's a couple of things, right? So one thing that we definitely want to do is like use a multi-asset shielded pool at the base layer of Osmosis, so people can do like private trading from it, right? Today, when you trade on a DEX, you're leaking your entire trading strategy. We want some sort of like you trade from a shielded pool. So you just know someone in the shielded pool is executing trades, but you don't know who it is. Right. To be honest, like after the whole Tornado Cash stuff, we were like, okay, let's not focus on. There was a team that was building this on Osmosis called Void, and then they kind of got spooked away from it. So right now, what we're doing is actually working with Namada so the Namada sort of go to market is going to be like they have their shielded pool chain, but they're going to allow you to execute swaps on like IBC swaps on Osmosis. So that's kind of you can use Namada as a shielded pool for trading on Osmosis. So that's I guess that's one thing. But I think you were also talking more about like not on the privacy side, but more on the verifiability side. And yeah, I think that I think we would want to be able so rather than putting the entire state machine in like being able to generate validity proofs today, like yes, the end goal of everything is that we want everything generating like zero knowledge proofs for all state machine transitions. But in the reality of it is it's like that writing today the best way to do that is use like Starkwares like Cairo and stuff, which is like it's gotten quite a bit, but it's still not anywhere close to writing like in Go or something like that, right? And like so it'll take a long time before like we have something that as developer friendly as Cosmos SDK is able to generate the zero knowledge proofs. Maybe if like risk zeros like stuff works out, then that will be possible. I think what is more doable in the short term is like this stuff called like ZK ETL. So oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges that you have right now is like you can query data from the chain and you get some sort of like light client proof. You can do light client proofs to query data from the chain, but oftentimes what you want a node to tell you is not just like what's purely at the state, but you want it to do computation over some data, right? And so it's like I want to add, like let's say the governance tally process, right? Like that is something you can't just while the vote is going on, you want to know what percent is yes, what percent is no. That's not something you can just like query via light client security. You have to query all the votes, run this computation over them, and then tell the front end this is what it is. And the idea is like, how can we move more of those computations that you need to like apply to data that you query from the chain? Can we start building zero knowledge proofs for those? And that will make it so like that will make it so that you can get all of these queries to also have the same sort of light client security as like you do when you're actually querying chain state directly. So I think that's probably that's like the direction we'd be more interested in, like that has a higher impact in a shorter time frame. I think there's like two teams out there working on ZK ETL stuff. One of them is called Proxima, and the other is I don't remember the other one's name. To be honest, I haven't been following much of the Cosmos Hub stuff since like Atom 2.0, really. So I don't know what the more recent stuff is. But how do you fix that? I don't know. The problem is just Jay has too much Atom and fan base that like it's hard to push anything that's like too controversial with Jay. Like apparently that's the reason that like ICS has like is based off of social slashing now rather than like actual fraud proofs, which is kind of sad. Because Jay was like, oh, we're gonna reject that. So I don't know how to solve that problem right now. I think that's one of the main reasons that it's part of the reason why the whole Gore 2020 stuff had to happen, where like, the ownership of that was just not decentralized enough. But okay, so what are things that we can do to improve Cosmos governance in general, like Cosmos SDK governance? I think there's a lot. Like one is like I think we need to categorize governance proposals. Osmosis is on like proposal number 300 or something at this point, and it's just like way too much governance overload. And that's like not it's getting very difficult to like for me to like keep up with every type of proposal. And so what we need to do is have different categories of proposals, and then let different categories have different processes for how they execute, right? Like, some proposal types should have maybe a shorter voting period, some should have longer voting period. Something like let's say like, I think like half the proposals on Osmosis are like just to update according to the mechanical like incentives upgrade process, right? We have this algorithm that we update incentives. And like it's just like to do that. It's like, well, why don't instead of having to have everyone vote on it, I think a valuable way of would be is like let's have a committee that like that is supposed to do that update, and they just post it, and anyone can like veto that governance proposal. So governance has the chance to veto that proposal in before that while that waiting period is there. So it's like almost like an optimistic governance proposal, right? Where like someone passes it knowing it will pass because they followed the algorithm, and it's like it only needs to be vetoed. Or another one would be like, let's say like a contract upload proposal, right? Maybe that should can go through governance, but it also has to go through a second house, which includes like some smart contract auditors, right? Like Oak Security is on retainer by the Osmosis grants program, and it'd be maybe like they should have to do like a signature, like also approving contracts to be deployed, or that they've audited these contracts. So yeah, in general, I think just like breaking it into different types of categories will definitely help solve a lot of the governance overload problems. The other one main thing I would probably fix as well is I think right now validators get way too much voting power. The fact that they inherit 100% of their delegators' votes is a little bit too overpowered in my opinion. What I would like to do is have something where it's like the validator inherits like let's say 25% of their delegators' power, but if the delegator comes and votes themselves, they use the full 100% of their power. So this is this is nice because it incentivizes, even if you agree with the way that your validator voted, it still incentivizes you to come vote yourself as well. So it like uses your full voting power, not just 25%. So I think that will help. Now the flip side of this is, if we depower the validators, we're worried that it just makes the whales more powerful in governance then. And it's like, I don't know, you have to like how to parameterize this to like meet the right trade-off. Right now, on the margin, I think that validators have too much power in governance. So how much to decrease it, I don't know yet. So Osmosis Labs, so we have like our Osmosis Foundation that has a bunch of like the subsidiaries or contractors, and just a way of like some people go from with it. The name of our company in the US is called Osmerica. So how do we work? We have about like 40 people, close to 40 people now, working on sort of all sorts of different things. One thing that I think people don't realize is like Kepler is actually separate than Osmosis. Like, so Josh and Tony, they had this company called Chainapsis, and that's the one that sort of built and maintains Kepler. And Chainapsis is a core dev entity of Osmosis, but Kepler is a separate entity and not owned by Kepler is a separate product line that's not part of like Osmosis Foundation, Osmosis Labs stuff, right? Like, so there are people on chain apps that work on both Kepler and on Osmosis, but there's also people who only work on Kepler or only work on Osmosis. So the organizational lines sometimes get a little bit blurred just because some people are spending time working on both, splitting their time. But yeah, so that's one thing, is like Kepler is actually not part of this umbrella. So yeah, what do we do? You know, we focus mostly on like the chain development, front end. We have a data team as well that like provides all the, you know, info page, but then it's also what's used by CoinGecko and DeFi Llama and any like integrator. If you want to get like your asset listed on CoinGecko, you need to provide a price, and so you know, we work with them to make sure that Osmosis Dex data is valid and can count for that. Yeah, and you know, we've been spending a lot more time on CosmWasm developer tooling, building up more of a CosmWasm team internally. You know, historically our team had been very like Cosmos SDK proficient, but not so much on the CosmWasm side. But in the last like 6 months, we've been sort of, what we've realized is that we want to do more and more of our development in CosmWasm rather than the SDK, and like some core modules that like treat the SDK as kernel code, use it when you need it, but like more and more stuff can be written in CosmWasm. So we've been building up that team. Our team is fully remote. I don't think we have more than 3 people in any one city, other than maybe Seoul. But yeah, so that definitely makes things harder. But like what we try to do is like meet up in person like once every 3 or 4 months, and try to do more like sub team meetings as well. So like, you know, we just did this like front end team retreat in Taiwan in January, and there we kind of like, it was good to have some in-person time. We were able to like knock out a lot of like design work on like where we want to see the Osmosis front end going from here and stuff, especially on the contrary liquidity design stuff. Like a lot of mission alignment is a big thing, right? Like I think one our team was like very like remotivated after the FTX collapse, to be honest, like because there was a period there where it was like, oh, is FTX just like doing everything that DeFi does, but like doing it in some magically regulatory compliant way and stuff. But I think that like, you know, after seeing the whole FTX collapse, that has definitely like reinvigorated a lot of the team of like, oh, this is why we have to build DeFi stuff. And then I think you know, we do a lot of like sort of learning sessions and stuff. Like, you know, a lot of our chain development team, like we're really focused on like, we're doing a lot of like ZK. We're all going through this like zero knowledge course together, like this MOOC that's available online. We try to do these like white paper circles on like a monthly basis. Yeah, I mean, admittedly, it is hard to build a company culture when everything is so remote, and so this is why, like, you know, we try to, whenever we do meet in person, try to foster that as much as possible. Like, so, like another thing, we like, you know, we would do like, we have an office in Berkeley that like we don't often use, but what we try to do is like do like month-long retreats there. So like we our entire team, like chain dev team, would go to Berkeley for like a month, and that's where we just started. Like, the goal was to knock out a lot of concentrated liquidity at that time, but then the whole Dragonberry stuff happened, and that kind of got in the way. I think step 1 is get MetaMask usable with Osmosis. So there's a way of, so if you look at how like Injective does it, they kind of do this where you can use MetaMask as the wallet for interacting with Injective, and it's like this like, we actually built a version of it as well like a while ago, but we just never shipped it at the time. Got busy with other stuff, I think. But yeah, so, but yeah, make it so people can, there's ways of hacking it so you can make Cosmos SDK transactions with MetaMask. And I think getting rid of that onboarding step of having to have people install a new wallet just to start using the system, I think will massively like reduce that overhead. And so, and then like idea is like, okay, when you want to get the premium experience, then you should switch to using Kepler. Like our approach to wallets is to take this like T strategy where it's like, let's support many wallets, but then like make sure we have really proper integrations with one of them at least. So that way, you know, you can use it, start using with anything, and then if you want the premier experience, you should switch to the, you know, one that is, you know, we spent the most time doing proper support around. So yeah, that's one. There's stuff we're working on with Axelar to like make bridging faster. Like there's this thing called for call that instead of waiting 15 minutes for the ETH transfer to arrive, what can happen is you can send, let's say you start bridging your ETH, and there's a 15-minute finality period on Ethereum. What can happen is any market maker can say, hey, if you want to speed up that, you can say a market maker can send you ETH on Osmosis, and then when your ETH arrives over the bridge, it goes to their address instead. So it's sort of like this liquidity time preference market that's built, but into the bridge itself. There have been a couple of people who've tried to build like liquidity time preference markets like outside of the bridge. Like Connects tried to do this first, I think. But I think when you build it into the bridge, you actually get a lot of like benefit. So yeah, this is sort of a design that we came up with that the Axelar team is now implementing. Yeah, I think those are sort of some of the main things. Hopefully we'll be able to do like the cross-chain swaps as well from Ethereum, but that's like we're starting with from Cosmos chains right now, and then if that works well, then next step would be doing it from EVM chains.